present to Tech Buying Committee tomorrow.
This looks interesting.
Your data center should be driving better business outcomes.
Exactly.
Find the right people, the right way.
Hi marketers, welcome to our monthly LinkedIn Marketing Labs. I'm Amanda Bates and I'll be your moderator today. I'm joined by 3 incredible marketing experts for today's class. I'll let them introduce themselves shortly. Today, we'll be talking about building an ROI framework. We'll be digging into how to best track your ROI and how to apply that to your LinkedIn campaigns. Before we get started, let's talk about a few housekeeping items. The tool we're using today is called Slido. On the right-hand side, you'll see a box where you can enter questions. We'll also be conducting a few polls during the event to keep it interactive. You'll be able to answer poll questions in the same box. I'd like to call out that if you prefer to ask questions anonymously, you have the opportunity to do so. On the left-hand side, you'll see a tab for an agenda. If you look at the agenda, if you click on the agenda tab, you'll be able to you'll get access to the deck and a bunch of other resources that we thought you might find valuable. Please note we will also be sending out a recording of this presentation via email in the next few days. We will also be taking a break about halfway through the content. It will be a 5-minute coffee break, and we'll let you know when that is. And then finally, at the end of our event, we will be pushing a survey out to everyone. If you could please complete that survey, your feedback is really important to helping us build out the right curriculum for these courses. All right, so now I'm going to turn it over to everyone, our presenters, to introduce themselves. Let's start with Kyle.
Hi, my name is Kyle Scriven. I'm a senior content marketing evangelist here at LinkedIn, and I work with our clients to help improve their marketing campaigns.
Hi, I'm Paulette Grand-Prix. I'm an account executive on our portfolio team, and my role is to educate and empower our clients to see success on our platform.
Hi everyone, my name is Lauren Ma. I am an Enterprise Client Solutions Manager on our tech vertical here at LinkedIn, and my role is tasked with helping marketers make the most efficient use of their marketing budgets on LinkedIn.
Awesome, thanks everyone. All right, so to kick things off today, we're going to warm it up with a really easy poll question. So we'd love to know where everyone is joining us from today. And so while we let you answer that, I will mention that we are broadcasting live from very rainy and windy San Francisco today. So right now we see some people joining from San Francisco, Dublin, Los Angeles, Germany.
Ooh.
New York City.
Norfolk.
What else we got here?
Houston.
Ooh, Jersey. Yeah,
Jersey.
That's what I want. Yeah.
Ooh, orange.
Houston.
The Netherlands.
Wow.
Netherlands.
Wow.
Some of these are
today.
places I'd like to go.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we have quite a global audience. We'll give it another few seconds.
Ooh, Idaho.
No, now Chicago and New York are winning.
Now it's Chicago's a big one.
Atlanta.
All right, so coast to coast and quite global. Okay, so let's jump into the content. I'm just going to walk you through the agenda, and then we'll just start digging in. So the first thing we're going to take you through is the state of marketing measurement. We'll then move into building a sound measurement framework. Around then, we'll take a quick break, and then we'll come back and talk about ROI and measurement and action, and then Kyle will take us through key takeaways to wrap up the session. Just please note, we'll also be pausing at different times to ask questions, so make sure you go ahead and enter those. All right, well, Kyle, please take it away.
All right, let's start with the state of marketing measurement. I think it'll be helpful to touch on where we currently are. The landscape is constantly changing. Every few months, there's a new trend. We're in January. This is the time where everyone's starting something new. I guarantee your feed is being bombarded with 2020 trends in marketing and measurement and data. Some of which is useful and some of which isn't. What should you be listening to? What's right for your business? These are things that we're going to try to work through today, and hopefully we'll give you a good platform to go out and build your measurement platform. I think a lot of times when people when they start thinking about their ROI structures and their measurement platforms, there's a lack of confidence, and we have data to support that. This is some research from Gartner last year, and what we're seeing is that 63% of marketers don't feel very confident. in their ROI measurements. They're still struggling to believe that their campaigns are being effective. And that's a huge challenge. It's almost as if you were back in math class as a kid and the teacher's asking you to show your work. I always hated doing that. I wasn't good at math. But it's one of those things where it's just like this dilemma, and it leads to the other side of the coin, in which CEOs and business decision makers are prepared to invest more in marketing, but they're not going to give that money and that resource if marketers aren't prioritizing an ROI and able to prove their work. So it's this like constant dilemma of, I could prove that this was working if I had more money, and then I'd be able to prove the value to the company, but the CEOs aren't willing to give that if they can't prove it first. So again, you have to show your work. One of the things that we're uncovering in this space, certainly in the ROI space, is that most marketers are trying to measure too soon and too quickly. I work with a lot of clients with a range of sales cycles that can range anywhere from 90 days to 2 or 3 years. But most people are trying to measure, we see 77% of marketers are trying to measure ROI of their campaigns within the first month of the campaign. You're not going to get an accurate reflection of actual return then. It kind of comes out of our need for everything to be instantaneous. I have Amazon Prime, I have Zappos VIP membership. When things don't get to my house in at least in less than 2 days, I start to get antsy. And marketers are kind of the same way now. And we're seeing that in this ROI structure, but it's something we have to break through. One of the things that's coming because of that instantaneous need is a favoring of short-term efficiency over long-term effectiveness. But what we've seen, the research doesn't really support that. We've done some work with Peter Bennett and Les Fields, who are researchers in the marketing and advertising space, and they've looked at over 40 years of data. And what that data has shown them is that while your lead generation and demand generation efforts might lead to earlier returns more quickly and more efficiently, once you get past 6 months, those start to tail off. Whereas your brand efforts that might be a little harder to measure within your measurement structure and a little more kind of vague, they tend to continue to grow over time well past that 6-month period. And so what you should be aiming for is a 60-40 split to really hit the best mix of your kind of marketing mix to really see long-term effectiveness and continue to grow that pool to continue generating leads. One thing you need to remember is that ROI is just one metric, return over sales cycle over the investment over sales cycle. And it's a trailing indicator of past performance. Past performance does not equal future success. And really, it's just one metric that should be within an arsenal of metrics and tools you're using to measure the effectiveness of your marketing campaigns. There are things like customer lifetime value, but you can also look at things like your productivity as a marketing team, revenue, customer satisfaction. I know in some previous roles I've had leading social teams, customer lifetime value was a huge metric for us. We were working for a membership organization and wanted to know in different age groups, what was the lifetime value of that person, and that can really give you some key indications that you might not get from other measures. But really, it's important to think about not just ROI when you're looking at how to build a measurement platform and how to prove the success of your marketing campaigns. So I don't think anybody sets out to fail when they build a measurement platform, but what tends to happen is you see the failure happen in 3 categories. One thing is that there's just not alignment between the KPIs and the overall business objectives. A lot of times we measure what's easy instead of measuring what will actually impact the bottom line for us. Beyond that, you're getting to a place where the inputs are incomplete. Less than half of marketers, I think it's around 47%, feel like they have a unified data view of all of the customer data sources that are available to them. They don't know how the CRM system is working. They don't have access to the social listening data. And when you're building out a measurement platform, if you don't have these, it's almost impossible to truly have a picture of what your customers are doing and where you're being successful and not. Lastly, the last place that measurement programs tend to fail is a disconnected reporting structure. So a lot of times metrics for marketing are reported by the department or different departments, and each one of those departments has its own agenda, and they aren't looking at a holistic view and the whole picture. And so that disconnected reporting that happens in siloed and matrixed environments leads to a lot of confusion and sometimes distrust. And that's where you start to see the measurement program really start to fall apart. When you're building your measurement program, and we're going to talk a lot about how to get to this throughout today's conversation, you need to design something that is going to be simple, flexible, and actionable. You want it to be simple because you're going to show it to people who aren't marketers, who aren't experts in this space. While you might be very comfortable in some of the marketing jargonese that is out there, your boss and his boss or her boss won't necessarily have the same kind of acumen. And you want to build something that they can easily take insights from and take action. Beyond that, you want it to be flexible. Like I said at the beginning, this market and this space is continuously shifting and changing, and you need to build a program that can stick with that. Beyond that, the goals for your organization can also change at the drop of a hat. I was in a client meeting a few days ago, and I found out right that minute that the goals for the company, their sales goals for the year had changed dramatically from the previous year. Your measurement program needs to be able to keep up with that and adjust as time goes on. And then last but not least, it needs to be actionable. If you're building a measurement program and a measurement structure and an approach where you're not getting insights that you can immediately turn around and make changes to your campaigns and improve their performance, then you've built the wrong structure.
So we have had some great questions come in, so we'll take a couple of questions right now, and we can open it up to the whole team. Let's start with the first one. So, how can I showcase that brand awareness campaigns are worth it when my leads want us to show ROI in a short time frame?
I think the challenge with proving that your brand campaigns are worth it is thinking about it in terms of there's going to be a longer lead there, and you need to use different metrics. We're going to have a slide further on in this deck that talks about the KPIs to look at. One of those things might be something like a brand lift study, whereas you're looking at, for lead generation, it's like pretty easy. You're just like, cool, I have 10 leads from this $1,000 campaign I just ran. Whereas your brand lift, you're really measuring perception. A lot of times people don't really think about it in terms of, like, they think that the company, it's only I need to get someone to know who I am. But really what you're looking at sometimes is, can I get them to know me the way I want them to? And then trying to prove out that value over time.
Oh, go ahead. I was going to say something else you can do is talk a little bit about how long the sales cycle is. If your sales cycle is 18 months and you need to prove the value of a lead or an opportunity in 1 or 2 months, that's not really realistic because the lead might come in, but it might take an entire another year for that lead to actually turn into opportunity and revenue. Another way you can really take a look at whether or not like brand awareness is making an impact on lead generation or conversions is take a look at how many people are actually clicking through on this ad as to compared to how many people are actually giving up their information to generate a lead. If we have a ton of engagement and a lot of people clicking through on the ad saying, hey, I'm ready to learn more about this, but whoa, I'm not quite ready to give up my phone number and my business email, that's kind of a signal to us that we need to do a little bit better of a job nurturing and generating a better impression of our brand to those members.
Yeah, definitely. And I think adding on to what Paulette was saying is it's harder to get approval for your entire budget, right? To go to brand or leads, what have you. So another alternative is just trying to set aside a separate test budget to get approval to conduct an A/B test where you have a control group that you only deliver more demand gen content, that's your demand gen budget. And then you have a test group where you deliver them both branding and demand content. And then you test the lift between the two. And LinkedIn has actually conducted a study similar to that, which we can share in the follow-up. But what we saw was that there was a 6 times lift in lead generation when you paired brand and demand. So that's more of like a tactical way that you can approach it a little bit more gently so that you can kind of warm up whoever is in charge of the budgets and determining that breakout. So hopefully that's a little bit helpful in how to actually kind of get that ball rolling.
And I'll just add on one final thing too, as a marketer myself. I try to, when I'm thinking about brand, also be a little bit creative in the metrics I'm looking at. So doing some deep dives into my web traffic, like did I see an increase? Leveraging tools like website demographics on the LinkedIn platform to see if my right target audience is visiting my website. And those are ways to that you can measure and show that in a presentation to your leads to prove that your campaigns are actually driving some impact. All right, we'll take one more question because we're a little bit tight on time. The next one I'd like to ask you guys is how to handle ROI conversations with clients when budget is based on monthly performance versus quarterly. So shorter time frame versus longer time frame.
I think this goes back to thinking about what your sales cycle really is. Is your sales cycle monthly? If it isn't, that's something to go back to your superiors and say like, hey, we're just measuring this too fast. Like I can't give you an accurate measurement. I understand you want to understand whether or not this campaign makes sense and is being effective and efficient. But if we're just measuring it too quickly, I'm going to be able to give you an incomplete data set. But what if we find out later, depending on the channel we're in, that this is just a channel that takes longer to prove ROI? I think you'd be kind of cutting off your nose to spite your face in that way. And maybe that's not the easiest conversation to have, but I think hopefully you'll get some data out of this conversation and some insights from the 4 of us where you can go and have that conversation.
Great. All right, well, let's turn it back over to content. So Kyle, take it away.
Cool. All right, so we've talked about kind of the state of measurement, and I think now let's move into the steps necessary to kind of build out the measurement framework. What we're going to go through are really what serve as the foundation of what you're building that framework on top of and the key elements inside of that. Okay, so any good actionable framework is going to capture each of these measurement elements in a clear and consistent way. Goals and KPIs, as well as your audience, your infrastructure, and your content, and I'll kind of go through each one of them. Your goals, they need to be specific and measurable, and they need to be broad enough to capture things, but also not so broad that basically everything fits into it. And then your metrics are going to tell you whether or not you're making progress towards those goals. So I'll use a quick analogy, and hopefully you watch football and I'll understand it. But let's say you're playing a football game. Your goal could be something like scoring a touchdown. The KPIs are we gaining yardage? Are we getting first downs? Are people catching passes? Those are the things that are telling you you're moving towards your goal. But those aren't the end goal. Like if the end goal was winning the game, your sub goal is, I want to score touchdowns. Getting more yards won't necessarily mean that you've won the game or hit your goal. Beyond that, you want to make sure you're reaching the right audiences and you know enough about your audiences to get them to convert or take the actions you're looking for. One audience isn't like another. You have niche segments now, and you need to understand your audience better to really build that measurement framework. Another thing in this process is building the right infrastructure, and we'll talk a little bit about this further on in the presentation. I know it's difficult, and there are lots of data sources and a lot of technology, and your tech stack isn't always controlled in the marketing department. But you have to make sure that there's some sort of alignment and visibility here so that you're accurately measuring what's happening. And then last but not least, content. Communicating to your audiences in the way that they want to receive content in the phase of the customer journey that they're in, that's hugely important when you're building your measurement structure. You also need to be honest with yourself about the maturity level of your marketing program. A lot of times when people are starting out building a measurement structure, they want to be at the 301 level immediately. They want to be, we're using this crawl, walk, run analogy, but they want to be at run. And it doesn't work that way. If your marketing platform or your marketing structure and your campaigns, and you're still thinking about things like defining objectives and aligning your metrics across the organization, it would be really hard for you to worry about something like multi-touch attribution or predictive modeling. It's just too far out of reach for you to get there. When you're in the walk phase and thinking about connecting data sets, maybe you can get to multi-touch attribution, but when you're still at crawl, like try to be in the phase you're in and move on from there. What you're looking for is starting where you are today and then building a framework that will help you advance your capabilities. For instance, I have a nephew, he's 1, and he now can walk, but he walks the way that 1-year-olds walk. They kind of wobble and toddle, but when he starts to run, he falls down, and he falls a lot. And because of that, you know, he wants to run, but he's not ready to run yet. And that's a good way to look at your measurement program. If you're not ready to run, start where you can build a framework that is working for you now and then add to it in the future. All right, another poll question. So it'd be helpful to understand what kind of KPIs are you guys using for your current marketing goals? All right, what are we seeing so far?
Tell us what you got.
Don't be shy.
I'd call on you if I could. This is a tricky one because there are a ton of different KPIs and sometimes they're not necessarily aligned to the marketing goals that people have. And sometimes like you're literally just measuring the easiest thing that you have. So leads is one. Yeah.
Turnover.
Turnover, interesting.
Ooh, NPS.
NPS.
I like that.
I like NPS. We used it a lot in my last role.
Pipeline.
Lifetime value. Good. So some of you guys are already there.
Yeah.
See, you guys knew it. You're
Yeah.
just being shy.
This is like an expert group. This is great.
Expert group. Yes.
I know.
Sign-ups, yeah. Newsletter sign-ups, email
Cost per
sign-ups.
lead. Sales.
Form fills. Everybody loves a form fill.
Unique visitors.
Engagement.
I wonder how people are measuring high-quality leads. Like, I know we have marketing qualified leads and you have high-quality leads, but the way you measure those things can be wildly different based on the companies you work with.
Spent on page. Awesome.
All right. Well, it looks like you guys are doing a lot already in the KPI space, but that'll make the rest of this conversation really helpful. So again, as we're thinking about the framework and the pieces, goals is the first one on the list, and it's the first one for a reason. We really want you to understand what the right goals are, and when I say the right goals, it's goals that are aligned with your company's business objectives. If your team sells widgets, whatever a widget is, you can't have a goal that's getting to 10,000 Instagram followers unless you can build a correlation between more Instagram followers and more widgets sold. If you don't have that, then you're looking at the wrong goals. A good way to think about goals is this SMART acronym, and you want things to be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. This is always a huge challenge, but when you're looking at specific, you want it to be granular enough to facilitate clear measurement, but also just not something that's so easily measurable. You do want it to be measurable, but you don't want it to be such a wide pool that you could define success as almost anything. I've worked in a lot of places where that happens pretty frequently. One of the hardest ones in this space is the attainable part. You have to be honest with yourself. If you can connect, to go back to my earlier example, if you can connect 10,000 Instagram followers to more sales of widgets, but you only have 200 Instagram followers, the chances of you getting to 10,000 or 10,000 LinkedIn page follows or whatever it is that you're looking for, it's not realistic and it's not an attainable goal, and maybe you should look at like breaking that goal into smaller chunks. So as an example, I lost about 80 pounds last year, but if I had thought about it in terms of lose 80 pounds, I wouldn't have done it. I tried to lose 2 pounds a week, and that worked a little better. Lastly, in the SMART acronym, you're looking at things like relevant and timely. So making sure that the goals you're creating are relevant to your business outcomes, and then they can be delivered in a specific time frame. And here's a good example of like what you don't want to do and what you do want to do. So a bad goal could be something like growing your company page followers in 2020, whereas You would look at, on the flip side for something like grow your company page following by 25% in the next 6 months. And the key differences here are that the one on the right is specific, it's measurable. You're looking for 25% growth, and it's attainable because you're not necessarily setting a number that would be impossible for you to get to, and it's time bound. Whereas on the left side, it's just 2020, and that's too wide of a goal. You might get to the end of the year and forget that that was something you were looking for. Whereas 6 months is a specific time frame. It's short enough for you to really start showing some improvement, but not so long that you kind of forget about it or it falls by the wayside. Beyond that, as you're thinking about your goals, you should really start trying to align them to the different phases of the customer journey. We'll say the same thing about a lot of things within this presentation and a lot of the aspects that fall within your measurement platform. But when you're in the awareness funnel, you should be thinking about things, or in the awareness section of the funnel, you should be thinking about things like growing your share of voice. And I really like share of voice in the awareness funnel. It provides a bit of a deeper interaction or insight into what your audience is thinking, and it helps compare yourself to the rest of your market. When you're in the interest phase, looking at things like growing your opt-in and subscriber base, or generating downloads, consideration would be something like, oh, we've generated more marketing qualified leads, or more signups. And then when you're getting down to the action phase, you have things like revenue and pipeline and increasing the close rates. But your goals should be aligned to these things. A lot of times you'll see companies where the goals are all in one. They're either all in the action phase or they're all in the awareness phase. But you should have a healthy mix across the funnel. That also goes for your media buying strategy. So far too often you see, and I think we've gotten some questions like this already, where conversion is where the majority of your media spend is being deployed. But it really should work across the funnel in the same way that your content does and your goals do. If your company or your target audience doesn't know enough about you or needs to, and you need to change the perception of your company, you should be focusing the requisite amount of money in the brand awareness space. And that works for when they're in the consideration phase as well, and like focusing on your media spend on website visits or video views and on down the line. You need to have an objective-based media buying strategy that ladders back to your outcomes. Okay, so let's move on to KPIs. And so these are the things that tell you whether you're on the right track towards reaching your goals. They're indicators, the touch points that will tell you like, okay, you're going in the right direction or you're not. But one of the things to think about is you should start simply. On this slide, there are a ton of KPIs. You do not have to have all of them. You do not have to use all of them. You need to use the ones that are aligned for what your business does and are available for you to get. But thinking about it also in terms of like where are your metrics and your KPIs alongside the stages of the funnel. So when you're in the awareness space, you have things like impressions and reach, but you also have things like brand lift, which I mentioned earlier, which can help tell you a more full picture of what your brand activities are doing. As you get in the consideration phase and you get to a place where your audience is more willing to take action or like build more of a relationship with you, you're looking at things that take a bit more investment from them, like open rate or just like general social engagement. Whereas in the conversion space, I think we all know what we're looking for at this part of the funnel, and your KPIs there can be revenue, can be leads, can be cost per leads, things like cost per action. All of these things are going to be the metrics that tell you whether or not you're hitting your goals or moving in the right direction towards your goals in the conversion phase. You should also think about choosing an attribution model. None of these is perfect. They all have their flaws. First touch and last touch, kind of self-explanatory in that in a first touch model, your credit for whatever your conversion or end action is goes to the first touch that the audience had or the customer had, whereas last touch is the opposite of that. And to use an example from buying a car, I bought a car this summer and I went to online forums, I watched reviews on YouTube, I went to a bunch of different review websites, I went to the brand, the automaker's website, and then I also went to a dealer and bought the car. In first touch, the first thing I did was watch YouTube videos, so I guess YouTube would get the credit for that one, whereas in last touch, the dealer would get all of the credit. And I think you can determine whether or not that works best for you what a lot of people are looking at the higher level of marketing measurement is a multi-touch attribution model. And this is where you have weighted scoring and are attributing different values to different actions and trying to give everybody a piece of the pie when a conversion happens. The challenge here is that this is the most complex and the one that needs the most amount of constant retuning. Your weights need to change as platforms change, as you learn more about your audience, but it can lead to the most full picture when thinking about attribution within your measurement structure.
All right, awesome, thank you. So we've got a few more questions that have come in. Let's start with one on going back to KPIs. So what KPIs would you recommend measuring if I'm looking to increase brand awareness?
So I definitely would look at things like favorability lift, brand lift. There are also like traditional ones like reach and impressions, although those ones can be gamed a little bit, and so you do want to try to look a little different. Beyond that, you can also think about things like share of voice, like I talked about a little earlier, because it can help you understand what the overall landscape looks like from a brand awareness standpoint, and then how you look as compared to your competitors.
I would say like share of voice, reach, frequency, number of people you're getting to your website.
Great. Okay, so to build on that, how do you measure the impact when you're using more marketing channels at the same time? So things like if I'm running campaigns on LinkedIn, Facebook, newsletters, events, those types of things. How do you kind of distinguish that that brand awareness from coming from a specific campaign?
So I would say it's all kind of what you were talking about with like the multi-touch attribution. So it's just kind of how you parse that out. But I would say it's also about creating that full marketing funnel as well and being able to attach that from your brand to your demand gen and seeing kind of how that correlates across the channels. So there's no real clear answer, and that's kind of what we're talking about today is like it's all of these different pieces and trying to create an ecosystem where you're able to create that measurement across all of the different channels and create some form of comparison.
Great, thank you. All right, and let's take one more. So Shannon's asking, how do you prioritize time and have leadership agree for data analysis when your team has to be very reactive to other teams' needs? Pretty common question or challenge, I think.
That is a tough one.
Hard.
Yeah, it's probably a challenge I faced in almost every role I've had. I think this, again, goes back to trying to think simply. There are certain things that you're just not going to be able to take on immediately, and when you're trying to prioritize time, that's why it helps to build a measurement structure that works for you in a really simple way and building like the building blocks of something that can be more robust. Because it gives you the ability to, when you have time, when you do have time, and when the other departments you're working with are kind of heads down in their own projects, you can spend more time building out the robustness of your platform.
I think it goes back to also remembering the goals of your company and really what you're trying to accomplish, and then evaluating maybe some of these like reactive tasks, like, okay, is this a quick win and is it going to make an impact on my overall goal or job that's really important to me? If yes, maybe do it. If no, it's really hard and something I'm working on, but learning to say no, not yet, but we will get to it.
Saying no is difficult.
Yeah. I think also just taking a step back at looking at your internal business processes. One question I'd like to ask you is, how often are you meeting with these other teams, and what kind of alignment do you guys have when you're actually developing these goals? One thing we have with LinkedIn is, Paulette's an AE and I'm a CSM, but we're very collaborative in making sure all of the teams are aligned and like having the same goals. So I would almost take a step back and look at the larger picture of like how you guys are even coming to these goals, prioritizing these things, because maybe it's a larger conversation about creating that alignment. Maybe it's like a team offsite, monthly meetings, things like that.
Yeah, and I'll just add to it as well. So I think this is a challenge as a marketer and having a marketing team here that we actually come across quite a bit. And one thing that I think has helped us is establishing a cadence for reporting and sharing that out with our leaders. So building that report and then adding colorful insights that they'll find valuable. And then once leaders start to see that report come out on a regular basis, whether it be weekly, biweekly, monthly, even quarterly, I think they'll learn, they might start to see the value of that more and then allow you that time to have to do the data analysis. And also it will become something that you are going to be held accountable for. So you'll have to carve the time out and make that a priority. So that would be one other piece of advice I would add as a marketer. Okay, so to keep us on time, I'm going to now turn it over to Paulette to jump into our next section.
All right, so moving on to the next audience, or the next section, focusing on the right audience. So why is this so important? What does the audience have to do with driving a strong return on investment? It's actually really important. If we are not reaching the right people, then essentially we can be wasting our ad dollars. If your product is to just focus on people that are in the healthcare industry, but we're sending out ads to everybody on LinkedIn, we're not making the most of the dollars that we have allocated here at LinkedIn. So when you're thinking about ROI, you're going to want to develop an ideal audience profile that details the following. So 1, audience demographics. Are you reaching a variety of people throughout each stage of the funnel? Do they have different seniorities? Do these people sit in different places around the world? Are we just focusing on North America? Are we focusing on Europe? Are we focusing on Asia? Next, you're going to want to think about decision maker and audience profiles. Who actually signs this contract? Who needs to know about this information you're trying to push out? Who's going to test this product? Who else is going to influence this decision at the end of the day? Again, going back to target industries, are there certain verticals that your product only offers to? Again, are you trying to boost awareness for a new business product or a new line that only impacts one type of vertical? Are you trying to reach people that just work in the government or just healthcare? Beyond that, you'll also want to think about target companies. Do you have a specific list of companies that you know are a good fit for your product or this information that you, again, are trying to share? And then finally, you'll want to think about lookalike audiences. Are you or is your leadership open to reaching out to people that are not maybe exactly this list of individuals, but look very, very similar to known customer profiles that you've seen success with in the past? So again, why is this so important, especially on LinkedIn? And it's because LinkedIn's audience means business. 4 out of 5 LinkedIn members drive business decisions, and LinkedIn's audience has 2x the buying power of the average web audience. We also know that people are more receptive to ads on our platform. I want to give you guys an example that relates to me in my day-to-day. So we use a product right now that we're piloting internally, and it essentially helps us be better at our jobs. Now, this product is also a LinkedIn Marketing Solutions client, and they're really, really good at dispersing thought leadership to every range of seniority within their target audience. Now, at the end of the day, I'm not signing the contract on whether or not we continue to use this product, but when I'm on LinkedIn and I'm at work and I'm trying to stay up to date on industry news, this brand is really, really good at, 1, capturing my attention, letting me know that this piece of content is going to be relevant to me, but 2, they're also helping me be better at my job, which in turn is going to help my clients be better at their jobs. Now you're probably thinking, cool, why is this important? It's important because, well, at the end of the day, I'm not signing the check or giving my credit card away to purchase this product, but it does transform my perception of the product. In my mind, this company is helping me get really good at my job, and in turn, helping hundreds of other marketers be better at their job. I've got a really, really good feeling about this brand. I'm familiar with them. When my boss or my boss's boss's boss asks me about my experience using this product, I'm going to say, it's been great. Like, I know this, this, and this. Well, in my day-to-day, I might not be getting that from the product directly, but that's in my mind from the nurturing and information and thought leadership they've been leveraging on LinkedIn. So again, while I'm not signing that contract. I am one of those people that has an influence on this business decision. Beyond that, like I mentioned, LinkedIn's audience is discerning and purposeful. When I'm on LinkedIn, it's usually to accomplish something. I'm looking to stay up to date on industry news, anything that is going to make me more efficient in my day-to-day, anything that's going to bring me to the top, or again, my hundreds of other clients to the top. Because again, if my clients are successful, I'm successful, LinkedIn's successful, everyone's happy. But this isn't the same with every platform we use. If we think about Facebook, me personally, I know I signed on this morning in my Uber to get rid of the little red notification telling me about someone's birthday. While this is really important to me, I care about my friends, I'm using Facebook to stay up to date on my friends' birthdays, look at my friends who are getting married, stay up to date on cool trips they're going on, not necessarily to get better at my job. Twitter, same thing, a little bit different. I'm staying up to date with world news. I like to follow celebrities and then also follow famous athletes. Again, none of these other platforms are bad. The intent is just very different across all of them, and why it's so important that you're reaching the right audience on LinkedIn, because the intent is there. People are trying to be better at their jobs, and if you're reaching them in this environment, you're going to be more likely to dive deeper into their brains. So digging deeper into LinkedIn's audience targeting capabilities, I know we've talked about a little bit when you were when we were outlining how we want to talk about creating an audience. On LinkedIn, you're able to do this in a few different ways. You can target by job experience, so think things like job functions, job seniorities, job titles, member skills, and years of experience. You can target by company. Again, maybe you know that there's a specific type of company that works best with your product or is relevant to this news update about your business. Maybe these people that you're trying to reach are lawyers and they have a specific degree, or they're doctors, or they went to specific schools. Maybe they all share the same interests. Maybe they're really interested in marketing. Maybe they're really interested in startups. I don't know, whatever it may be. An example that I want to use is there's a ton of different ways to target and reach audiences, and there's no cookie cutter one best way to reach an audience. So this client that I work with, they specialize in healthcare, and they need to reach a specific subset of HR professionals that aren't recruiters. And this can be really tough because if they're looking at the smaller, more startup vibed companies, it actually would be the head of HR that they're wanting to talk to. But if they're working with a massive corporation, it might not actually be the head of HR that they're looking to speak to. So it can take a little bit of A/B testing, seeing which audience resonates best with your sales team if you're trying to generate leads, or working with your leads to better understand who exactly you're trying to reach. But we have a variety of different ways to reach these audiences. And then finally, we have age and gender targeting, which can shrink audience size and we don't typically recommend. However, we know that some campaigns this is necessary for, so it's an option. Again, I always recommend working with your sales leaders or even speaking with sales individuals to get a better understanding, especially if you're focused on lead generation, to really understand what types of leads generated turn into opportunities or turn into closed-won deals. And then finally, another way that we can reach your audiences on LinkedIn is through matched audiences, which help you engage with your already active communities. So we have website retargeting, where we're going to be able to reach people that have already been on your website, whether you want to reach them from your entire website or just specific pages. We have contact targeting, where you can upload a list of contacts and emails to reach your audience. I want to caveat this with, we recommend having at least 10,000 members, because on average, we match about 55%. So if you have 10,000, cut that in half. That's really only going to be around 5,000 members, which isn't really scalable and can be really expensive. So we recommend the larger the better. And then finally, we also have account targeting, which is going to help you upload a list of companies that you're interested in reaching. It's less manual, and you're able to target more than 100 companies, which you're restricted to when you type in those companies manually into CMT. So now we will go into Q&A again.
Great. Awesome. Thanks, everyone, for your great questions. We'll take a couple more. So the first one we'll start with is, what company is doing the most accurate multi-touch attribution? I'll spin that around and say, do you have any examples of clients who are doing multi-touch attribution, and how are they doing that effectively?
I'd say it's really different for every client, as every business has different priorities and goals. I think that the companies that do it best are very organized, and they're open to change and reweighing their multi-touch attribution structure, because while 1 month, one channel can be extremely heavy and work really well, that can change very, very quickly the next month. So I'd say the best marketers and the best clients are very nimble and pay very good attention to detail when they are evaluating their multi-touch attribution.
I've seen, certainly in the software and technology sector, and I mean, that's not rocket science, it kind of makes sense that those are going to be some of the people who are focusing on something that feels a little more complex, like multi-touch aggregation, without mentioning names, but they're definitely looking at some of the bigger technology and software providers across the country and across the world. They are working on multi-touch attribution campaigns or structures. If you stick with us in the presentation, there will be a slide towards the end where we have an example of what one of those looks like.
Great. I'll also just add that I think that one of the other keys to multi-touch attribution is just that sales and marketing alignment, and really working with sales on how you're going to measure and looking at that weighted model and making sure you're both aligned, because having sales buy-in is going to be key to the success of that program. Okay, great. Moving on, we'll move to a little bit more of a brand question. So this one comes in and it says, how can we measure favorability lift? And why should we be wary about reach and impression metrics?
I wouldn't be wary. The only thing I would say for reach and impression metrics is that the thing to think about is that those numbers tell you a piece of the picture and not all of the picture. Reach and impressions can sometimes be measured differently on different platforms and mean different things. If I just scroll by something fast on my screen, that could count as an impression, but I might not have taken anything from it that would be beneficial to your brand. Things like favorability lift and brand lift, those are like larger studies working with a variety of platforms. We offer them here at LinkedIn. I know some of the other platforms offer similar products where you run kind of time-bound campaigns and then have a survey afterwards to determine whether or not there was either favorability or a change in perception of the brand or brand awareness.
We'll add a couple of considerations to have when thinking about measuring brand favorability is, Kyle touched on it a little bit, but making sure you have a solid amount of time, because if you think about yourself and your own purchase decisions in your life, most of the time it doesn't, I will impulse purchase things at the grocery store, let's be real. But usually it takes some consideration, like when Kyle was looking at his car, things like that. And it's also important to think about your sample size and in relation to your budget, because if you have a huge audience and your budget's a little bit smaller, you're not going to be able to really see the effects. So Kyle was hitting on this earlier and making sure that it's sizable. What was the word? It started with an A.
Attainable.
Attainable, thank you, yes. So when you're thinking through those logistics, just make sure that everything's attainable, it's measurable, and you have enough time to actually execute on it.
Yeah. And the last thing is with reach and impressions, when I'm thinking about making recommendations or I'm thinking about my clients, how they're going to communicate this value to their leadership team, it's really easy to forget that not everybody is in our lingo every day. Like, somebody might not know what an impression is, or if 100,000 impressions is a lot. So making sure you can bring it back to really make it make sense with your business goals and objectives is something to be conscious of
Context
as well.
is really helpful.
Great. Okay, we're going to take one more question, and it's more related to audience. So this one, it comes in and it says, there currently is a trend in B2B using ABM targeting more than platform-based targeting. What is your take on it?
ABM is like it's almost like a dirty word sometimes. You feel like it's a new trend, obviously, or not new, but it's something that's becoming more popular. I mean, really, it depends. Like I hesitate to answer a lot of questions here with it depends, but what makes the most sense for your business? Like, do you have enough of an audience where you can start leveraging ABM efforts? Or is your audience in a different place and you need to think about them in a different way? I wouldn't sit up here and tell you there's a silver bullet answer to any one of those questions, but I welcome the perspective. If you guys know of a silver bullet, please tell me.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really like anything you do in life. If you think about the way you eat, if you just eat candy all day, it's probably not going to be very good for you. If you just have an ABM strategy, maybe it'll work for a little bit of time, but if you're doing this for 5-10 years, it's not really sustainable. So I don't think that it is bad to do. I don't think it is good to do. But again, it's about balance and making sure that it makes sense for you right now and that it's going to make a positive impact on your business and your business goals.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to add that I think also thinking about the platform that you're using or the channel. So sometimes digital can be really hard to leverage for ABM. I know there are marketers out there that do a great job doing that, but sometimes just consider what your audience is. If the content is like relevant to marketers beyond just those bigger companies, I would encourage you to expand it because ABM is about one to one or one to few, but don't forget about those one to manys. I think having that right mix and kind of priming those people that might be coming up through the ranks as time goes on is really important to consider as well.
Yeah, and also just consider your goals too. Like, are you trying to increase product or service adoption within the same account that's an existing customer? Then ABM might be for you. But then to what Paulette was speaking about, if it's more like you're trying to get net new prospects, then ABM's not going to be the right fit for you. And then one other thing to think about is with LinkedIn, with ABM, it's actually, you're able to apply our targeting with ABM and get really deep demographics, which I'll actually talk about in the next section. So I wouldn't think of it as separate things either. I think that's what something that's very unique about LinkedIn is the ability to kind of marry the two still.
Great. Okay, thanks everyone for all those great questions, and we'll try to keep plowing through those as we go on. Right now it's break time, so we're going to take a 5-minute break. It is just about 11:23, so we will reconvene around 11:28 to be very specific. So take a walk, stretch out, get some water, and we'll see you in 5 minutes.
LinkedIn lead gen forms are a great solution for marketers looking for qualified leads. Lead gen forms are customizable, pre-filled forms with a prospect's LinkedIn profile data that can be added to your sponsored content or sponsored in-mail ad. So, how can lead gen forms help you and your business? At a glance, lead gen forms help marketers collect high-quality leads at scale. They provide a simple way for companies to gather the data they need to qualify a lead in one click from a member on LinkedIn. They also make it easy to track the ROI of your LinkedIn campaigns with cost per lead, form fill rates, and conversion rate reporting. You can use lead gen forms to deliver content like white papers and ebooks, share an event sign-up, generate newsletter sign-ups, provide discounts, and more.
All right, welcome back, everyone. We are going to move into our next section, the right infrastructure, with Lauren.
Hi guys, hope you enjoyed a wonderful break. But now, we talked earlier this morning about setting the right goals, KPIs, and then in this next section, we're gonna talk about how you create the right infrastructure to ensure that your marketing efforts are both measurable and actionable. So let's get to it. So today I'm going to take you through 3 key systems or components that are crucial to your marketing infrastructure to be able to ensure that you can prove the ROI and put the right success metrics in place. And so why this is important is that it's the difference between data and insights. And when we're thinking about this, data is just a data dump. It's numbers, but the insights are the learnings, the takeaways, and the ability to actually gauge your performance and make sure that you're really optimizing your marketing efforts. So we're going to start off with channel analytics, which is anything that you can see in the platform, impressions, clicks, looking at your campaigns, your targeting, etc. The next piece of this is website analytics, so traffic to own channels, retargeting pools, on-site conversion activities, and then finally marketing automation and CRM, which is where you're going to really be able to assess the quality of your leads. This is where things like lead scoring, nurture, pass-through, pipeline opportunity, and revenue data come into play. And these are all really key components because, as you can see, these are telling you various levels of performance granularity at different stages of the marketing funnel. But before we get too deep into the technology piece of this, I want to take a quick step back. The key ingredient to this whole infrastructure is actually not your technology, but it's you. It's that human insight, that human element that is able to draw out those insights, those conclusions. And your marketing tech stack or your technology or your infrastructure should really just be that supporting or that complementary aspect to make you more successful in measuring performance. It shouldn't be a replacement for you. And when we take like a personal spin on this and approach, let's take it back to, your middle school, high school days where there's new slang coming out left and right. And for me personally, the word was sick. And we all think of sick as this technical term of, being ill, not feeling well. But when I was growing up, sick in the form of slang meant awesome or cool. And when we think about it, it's that human element that can differentiate between the two in different contexts. But if you apply a technology aspect to it or AI, it won't be able to, unless you're Urban Dictionary, but that's a special case. So with that being said, let's dive into the 3 key components. So the first is channel analytics, and where to get started with that on LinkedIn is going to be your conversion tracking. And I want to point out a really unique feature of LinkedIn conversion tracking, which is not only the ability to see the volume of conversions, but who is actually converting. LinkedIn conversion tracking offers really deep audience demographics into the different audiences that are converting. And it creates this connection between who you're mapping out as your key personas, who you're trying to target, and actually creating that alignment between who is converting. Why that's important is that you're able to optimize towards your conversions in that way. And what's really great that you can see in this slide here is that LinkedIn offers the ability to slice and dice these demographic findings in a variety of ways. So you can take a look at it by job function, title, industry, company size, and what these different facets are telling me are, oh, awesome, these are my top 3 industries. This is my sweet spot for my company size. I have a couple of clients where they're like, we're really well known in the enterprise space, and now it's time for us to turn our focuses to mid-market. So there's those different types of ways that you can leverage these insights to really hone in and optimize your marketing efforts. But those aren't the only benefits of LinkedIn conversion tracking. So you're able to see a more cohesive picture of your marketing performance. We offer view-through conversions, click-through conversions, and then also we're able to show you varying levels of granularity in your marketing performance by campaign level, creative level. And then on top of that, you're also going to be able to unlock advanced features for stronger ROI. One feature is conversion auto optimization. And what this does is it tells the platform to adjust your bid to get the most key results to make the most efficient use of your budget. And when we conducted a study internally, we saw that there was a 13% reduction in CPAs in comparison to just standard conversion tracking. Additionally, I'll go into this a little bit later, but you'll also have access to website retargeting and website demographics. And then finally, you can use this demographic insight or data to really optimize and hone in on the right audience. So the way that I would use this conversion tracking audience demographic data is it can validate that you're reaching the right members, or if you're seeing a couple of audiences coming through that you're not looking to target, you can anti-target them in your campaigns to ensure that, again, you're optimizing that budget. Okay, so we've talked about the benefits. Now, how do we actually set this up? Coming from a programmatic display background where I had to QA 100 pixels 3 times a week for one account or one client, this is amazing. So I'm really excited to tell you about this. It's really easy, really simple, and takes very minimal maintenance, if any. So there's 3 key steps to setting up your conversion tracking. So the first piece is entering in your settings. The second is actually assigning it to your campaigns. And the third is telling our platform how to track those conversions. So with entering in your settings, there's 4 pieces of information you're gonna need. The first is your conversion type. So that's anything, leads, downloads, what have you. The next is an optional facet to help you measure your return on ad spend in the platform. So you can assign a conversion value if you would like to do that. The next piece is setting your attribution windows. And an attribution window is, it tells you between when a user saw or clicked on an ad and within that time frame when they converted. And so, or what to count as the time frame. And so our default is 30-day click, 7-day view. And then a really awesome new feature that LinkedIn has is being able to select your attribution model. So we have 2, which is each campaign or last campaign. So each will attribute a conversion once someone converts to every campaign that touched that user. And then last campaign will only assign it to the last campaign that reached that user. And then this is a really awesome feature, but instead of manually adding conversion tracking to 10 different campaigns, 20, you can do it at one time with one click of a button. And then finally, it's determining how to set up your conversion tracking. We offer 2 options. So one is the LinkedIn Insights tag, and this is the amazing part that I was alluding to. You place the Insight tag, which is a JavaScript code, on your website. It's one piece of code instead of 100, and then it covers your. And then you can tell our platform how to track the conversion using starts with, contains, or exact with the URL. So this is best suited if there is a web page associated with your conversion. And then we also have event tracking pixel or an image pixel where you would put it on something like a button or a conversion that's within a form that doesn't actually translate to a new page. We also have an amazing LinkedIn Marketing Solutions Help Center with step-by-step instructions. So I highly recommend checking that out because even I have to consult it sometimes and it's really thorough. All right, so as I was mentioning, we have this LinkedIn Insights tag. So similar to conversion tracking, we can also look at the same audience demographics for your website. And so you can look at it by job title, job function, etc. And some of the key benefits are being able to understand your audience. So with the website tracking, you can look at your website demographics broken out by your homepage, your product pages, and then, as we mentioned, your thank you or your conversion pages. What's really awesome is you might see on your homepage that there's a lot of job functions, a lot of different people, but then as you go further down the funnel at people who are actually researching your product and getting closer to making that decision, you're going to see those job functions become a little bit more specified and specific and focused. And then you can use that to validate that you're reaching the right people and see who's really coming to your website. And then you're also able to leverage this and create a retargeting pool to retarget these users. And why this is really valuable is you're reaching high value audiences that are raising their hand with interest, but they might need a little bit more education to be pushed down the funnel to actually make a purchase. And then finally, you can use these demographics to validate you're reaching the right audiences, or you can identify new people that are coming to your website that you didn't think were actually in your key personas, and you can try targeting them as well. And then finally, we have marketing automation and CRM. So this is, again, where you're gonna assess the quality of your leads. And so LinkedIn makes it really easy to integrate into what you're already doing. So we have a variety of partnerships with a variety of marketing automation and CRM platforms to help you with things like lead scoring, pipeline, and being able to really connect the dots between the metrics you're seeing in the platform with like your CPA, your conversions, clicks, demographics, and then what's actually turning into revenue and closed opportunities. And with that, we will turn it over to Q&A.
Awesome. All right. So let's see. We will take one. Let's see. Just trying to pick a good one here. What are other ways to measure customer satisfaction aside from surveys?
I feel like you could, it depends on your time frame, but I think someone mentioned on the KPIs question, it was turnover and customer retention. So just repeat, it depends on your product again, like if it's a service who's like renewing their subscription, or if it's a product, maybe it's deeper product adoption, or things like that. You guys have any?
Yeah, I mean, even if you're like, let's say you're running a content site and you'd think about something like how long are they spending on articles, or how many articles are they going to? The same way you would, if someone's in on one product, they could come into multiple products within your product suite. There are a bunch of ways to look at that and infer customer satisfaction that aren't just like, take the survey and tell me that I did a good job.
I think you could also take a look at, again, like how long they're using your product or service, if maybe like how often they log in or out. If it's something that's a start to finish process, is there a place where they drop off in that process? Is it easy to complete? Those are my takes.
Great. Okay, let's see. The next one was, how do you decide where to set targets for your goals and KPIs?
I mean, I think what we've talked about today is a lot about figuring out where those goals are attainable. So thinking about looking at your past performance, I know that you don't always want to look at your past performance as an indication of what will happen in the future. But let's say follower growth is a goal that you have. Well, if your typical follower growth is 25 followers per month, your goal should be aligned to that. Even if you want to stretch a bit, it should be in relation to what you've seen in the past. It's not the only indicator, but it's a good place to start.
Yeah, I'll add that some other ways to kind of set goals would be, again, I always keep drilling in the sales and marketing alignment, but working with your sales team when you're talking about some of those other metrics like pipeline and bookings, as well as looking at growth of your company and trying to align to that is another kind of creative way to think about it. Especially if you're just getting started, you're going to have to just kind of pick something that might be a little bit arbitrary, and over time you can adjust and start to learn from what's happening with your programs and also the growth of your company.
I think it starts too with the SMART goal, like outlining. And again, to your point of aligning with your sales team, of course, the sales team is going to want millions and millions of leads, but maybe you only have, I don't know, $30,000 a quarter. Is it realistic that you're going to generate 100,000 leads? Probably not. So finding a way that you can use that SMART framework to back into a number as well that makes sense for you and your business.
Great. Okay, we'll do one more. I think this should be relatively quick. Do I have to be actively running ads to use website demographics?
No, so you can actually implement the insights tag onto your website and then it will populate. So you do have to have an ad account, so you can get the insights tag from there. And then once you add the insights tag to it, you can start seeing your website demographics and you can actually use that to inform your launch strategy.
Okay, great. Well, let's turn it back to content. I believe, Kyle, you're back up.
All right, so they got the content marketing guy to come and talk about content to help bring us towards the end here. As we think about the last pillar of the house that you're building and the foundation you're building for your structure, content is going to be hugely important. I'm obsessed with it. I've been obsessed with it for as long as I can remember. My wife will tell stories about me analyzing the ads between the shows she watches, primarily because they were more interesting than the shows she was watching, but she's not interested in why this Heineken advertisement is structured the way it is, and I am. Content is really the backbone, like we said earlier, of what your measurement structure is going to look like, and you really need to focus on it. You can build the best program, but if your content isn't aligned with the goals that you have and aligned with your what you're able to measure and what your business outcomes are, you're really not going to see the success you're looking for, and the measurement framework you build around it isn't going to make much of a difference. So your great content also needs to be supported by a strong media campaign, and vice versa. Your media campaign needs to be supported by strong content. I follow some people who work in the retail marketing industry, and again, no matter what you do, if the products are bad, you can't sell it. Like, the marketing team isn't going to be able to fix it. And you can look at your ROI platform as the way that you market yourself internally at the company that you work for. But along those same lines, your content, again, needs to go kind of hand in hand or hand in glove with a strong media strategy that focuses on the different pillars or phases of the customer journey. One of the things that people are consistently looking to do within their marketing teams is driving for market share, whether it's growing that market share, leveraging it for additional revenue, getting them to, like the question we got earlier, looking at how can we get people to cross-sell and upsell. But that marketing touch has to be always on. I've worked in marketing for over 15 years now, and I can remember back in the olden days when the thought of an always-on strategy was something that felt foreign. Now that's table stakes, that's the expectation, and working towards this market share is kind of like fueling an engine. No matter what you do, your car is going to continue to need fuel, and you'll continuously need to look at things like the fuel gauge to find out whether or not you need to put more fuel in it, or fuel lights. Those are all your KPIs and the signals to tell you whether or not you're working along the journey correctly. And content kind of serves as that fuel for this measurement platform. Humans aren't particularly linear, and on LinkedIn you see that people want a variety of different things. What you see is that they want content typically that's relevant to them. They want it to be educational or informative. They like to stay on top of the latest brands. I know we've talked about that as far as like what we look to do on the platforms, and that's representative of what people are doing themselves, and we see that a lot from our audience. Now, that's not carte blanche from a content standpoint to go and say like, all right, well, if I hit these 5 things, then I've kind of solved the puzzle from a content standpoint. It doesn't work that way. Recently, there was an article in the New York Times kind of foretelling the death of the advertising industry, and it basically said the advertising industry has a problem, people hate ads. But what really is happening is that people don't like bad advertisement. They don't like bad content. And if you think about a world where you're competing with everyone, I don't have to pay attention to your content that's not, engaging or interesting to me. I can go to somewhere else, and the competitors in my space or in your space are doing things that are going to engage me in a different way. Another thing to think about is doing fewer things better. This is a slide that touches on research from the Content Marketing Institute, and they went to survey to self-surveyed marketers who said that like when they're looking at content campaigns or marketing campaigns, they see the most success in content creation and focusing on higher quality and more efficient content. There's this thought that you need to produce more content focus at the bottom of the funnel, just kind of spray and pray and hope everything works out. But what we're seeing across the industry is that there's more success in focusing in making the content you do have perform better. And that's a lot of what your measurement platform is structured for. You want to take those insights and use them to inform what's going to happen later in your campaigns and optimize that content going forward. When I was at the Advertising Week conference last year, Gary Vaynerchuk said that he wanted brands to start making 10x or 100x more things. And that might make sense for certain brands, but by and large, doing fewer things better is going to be a better strategy for most marketers. You should also look at designing your campaigns to focus on the marketing objectives that you have. So again, if we're thinking about the funnel, your content should ladder up to the different phases of the customer journey. And you should think about it, you can kind of think of it in two larger buckets, whether it be education and action or awareness and lead gen. When you have someone that's in the awareness phase, you're talking about people who either don't know you or need to get to know you better and they're seeking information. These are where you're using your brand awareness campaigns that, like we said, are always on. And you're looking at measuring these with website traffic, retargeting pools, whether or not they're growing, click-through rate, and things like downloads, subscriptions, opt-ins, etc. Whereas once you know that the audience is ready to start taking action, or at least is giving you indications that they're willing to spend more time with you, that's when you get to a place where you're really leveraging solution-specific content, your customer stories, your success journeys, and then you get to things like, are we driving more conversions, more marketing qualified leads? Are we influencing revenue? I think that's every marketer's dream. But these are the ways in which you're looking at to develop content that ladders up to these two kind of larger buckets to fit within your overall measurement structure. Another thing to contend with specifically on LinkedIn is that it makes a lot of sense when you are merging your brand and acquisition efforts. I know there's a tendency, and we've talked about this a little earlier, to focus solely on acquisition, bottom funnel, lead gen, demand gen. But what we see on LinkedIn is that when members are exposed to both brand and acquisition messaging, they're 6 times more likely to convert. And that's been proven out in our data, but data from other places as well. So you should continue to push. I know you're probably having these fights internally about, well, I can measure the acquisition efforts more quickly and improve the ROI of them, but you'll see better results when you're mixing the two. To kind of wrap up on content, here are 5 keys to consistent success. So we've talked about this a little bit, but you're competing with everything. You're competing with not just the people in your segment and the other brands in your segment. You're competing with their friends and family. You're competing with movies, TV shows. Everyone's competing for the same space. So it makes sense to try to identify what white space you can own and really start to be a trendsetter. It also helps to try to stay relevant. I mean, relevancy is one of the greatest challenges, and it's a moving target. And sometimes, you can use relevancy and trendsetting kind of hand in hand. That might mean taking a contrarian viewpoint. It doesn't mean make things up or take a contrarian viewpoint just to take it, but if you can own that position and build repeatable content franchises around a contrarian viewpoint that's different from the rest of the market, that's a white space you can own and a trend you can continue to move forward. You should also look to leverage your leaders. I think everybody's interested in thought leadership on LinkedIn's platform, but in other places. But when thinking about leveraging your leaders, people tend to go to, all right, well, my CEO is doing like a long form blog post and we're going to publish that to LinkedIn. Think about diversifying your delivery, whether it's thought leadership content, brand content, conversion, all of the phases of your funnel. People are engaging more on mobile devices. You need to offer up content that fits them in the time that they have to give to you. Don't just make everything either really long or really short. Have a diverse mix so that you can hit people in the different phases of the funnel, but also where they are just in life at that moment. And we're going to go back to Q&A.
Great, thanks, Kyle. All right, so we have a couple of more questions from the audience, and as a reminder, please keep asking those questions. And also, I forgot to plug earlier that if you want to tweet or use LinkedIn to share some of your learnings from this event, please use hashtag LinkedIn Marketing Labs. We'd love to see your content out there. Okay, so let's turn over to a question. Lauren, I'm going to direct this one towards you. is setting up a website pixel easy or hard, and is there a cost to it?
So I assume this is the LinkedIn Insights tag. So all you need to do is go onto LinkedIn and create an ad account, and then there's a help center that we can link out to in the follow-up, and it can go through all of the steps of how to find your Insights tag, how to create an ad account, and how to add it to your website. But at a high-level overview, you just need to create an ad account. It's free. You don't need to start running any ads or anything. You take this snippet of JavaScript code, and then you put it into the global footer of your website. And for lack of a better term, it like crawls all of the pages of that domain. And so then when you go into LinkedIn to actually set up like your website demographics, you insert how you want us to differentiate the pages. So you do that with your URL. So there's exacts, starts with, or contains. So if you wanted to do your home page, you might just do start or exact and your home page. If you want to do the entire site, you might just do starts with and then like the first snippet of whatever your domain is. But that's how you can get it set up. It's really easy. You just take that snippet of JavaScript code, throw it in the global footer, and then it should be all set to go.
Great. Okay, one more. How do you quantify the value of a follower and spending budget on paid follower campaigns? Very LinkedIn specific.
It's a tricky question. The value of a follower is not something that's easily attained, and I think it depends on what kind of market you're in. I used to liken things to like engagement metrics. So if a share was $1, a comment was 50 cents, and a like was a penny or a dime. When thinking about your followers, you need to think about whether or not your followers actually ladder back up to a larger business goal. So increasing that, like if you can say, well, for 10,000 followers, that equates to $50,000 additional dollars, then you can just kind of do the math equation and figure out how to value your followers. But if you're not sure that increasing your followers actually has an impact on your business objectives, I might suggest that you want to look in a different place for kind of a measurement opportunity.
I think on your company page, you can also take a look at your follower demographics. And then from there, you can assess, okay, what percentage of these followers actually fall within my key audience persona? And based on that, it's not necessarily like a monetary follower value, but you can just like assess the demographics and then create a campaign to increase followers from a certain demographic. So in that way, it wouldn't necessarily be the value, but it's really just applying that demographic insight to show that you are creating value because you're changing who's following you. And then also, if you think about it, once they follow you, you're able to serve your content to them for free. So again, there's no real monetary assignment to that, but if you think about the larger picture of it, it just kind of makes sense.
Great. Okay, I'm going to actually take one more question because I think this one is good. It just came in. So what is a good approach to combining gated and ungated content on LinkedIn?
So some of that is value proposition. When you're thinking about gating your content, so there's an example I use, and I won't mention the company, but there was a campaign where they were trying to promote some interview questions, but instead of showing you the interview questions after you clicked on the post, it took you to a form fill, and it was gated. And you really need to think about, does the value match what the customer experience is going to be? As you're in the higher parts of the funnel, you really need to be giving value without necessarily getting something back in that period. You're not being overly promotional. There's not necessarily a call to action. And so when you're thinking about gating your content, where does it fall in that value area? Do you believe that this is something that is so different and that your brand only owns and people won't be able to go find it elsewhere? Then maybe it makes sense to gate that behind something. If it's something that's a little more general or the kind of thing that you do have a different POV on, but like maybe some other competitors do as well, maybe that's something to put before a gate.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you really want to think about the entire funnel and again, the big picture. If you're starting to really focus on brand awareness, maybe you think about not gating the content, and then as you move farther down the funnel, into like a consideration phase or a lead generation phase, then gating the content. But again, if you're just trying to generate awareness, like Kyle mentioned, and you're not really giving anything to this person right away, they're probably not going to give you anything back. And it's not going to be like the best use of your ad spend.
Yeah, and in the platform, Paulette mentioned this earlier, but you can take a look at your clicks and your engagements, your CTR, engagement rate, et cetera. And if you're noticing that there's a drop-off between your engagement and your actual conversions, then that's just a signal to you that you need to invest a little bit more in that ungated content. So I would also, again, just use that data to glean those types of insights to inform how you proceed.
Great. Awesome. Well, let's turn it back to Kyle for our next section.
Great. So we've covered through the pillars of what are going to make up your measurement program, but we wanted to give you some examples of what it looks like in action. So the first example is one from us. This is how we look at measuring some of our own ROI in specific segments. So this is an audience of digital marketers, and we're using a propensity model for targeting. But the way it's structured is, alongside the funnel. So you're looking at things that would be in the awareness phase on the left side here, like website traffic, and you're measuring it. We're measuring it through Google Analytics and a LinkedIn Insight tag. And the type of content that fits in here are things like blog posts and guides and ebooks and static graphics and motion graphics, et cetera. Whereas when you get to a place where the customers are more willing to spend time with you, in that inquiries and leads kind of function within the funnel, we use a tool called Eloqua, and we're looking at things like signups, registrations, gated downloads, because in that phase, the customer and the consumer is more willing to spend more time with you and engage with you at a deeper level. And as we get down to the bottom of the funnel, we measure most of that with Salesforce, and we're looking at things like marketing qualified leads, your opportunities, and then revenue. And again, to cover on something we talked about a little earlier, thinking about how you prioritize your channels in this space is important. The attribution windows need to be different depending on the channel. Paid social tends to have a longer attribution timeline than something like email. When you receive an email and it's coupons, let's like say this is B2C, you might click directly to that page and go buy something. Whereas in social, it might take a little longer for that conversion to occur. And you need to prioritize that in different ways within the bottom of the funnel and how you're measuring it. Looking a little forward, so we talked a bit about multi-touch attribution. This is how one enterprise tech company that we work with is scoring their leads. And you can see they have a really robust platform. They break it out by channel, and then they have different actions for each of those channels. And then there's a score assigned to each one of these actions. And you can add things like time variables to influence the scores. So things like an email open within 30 days versus an email open outside of 30 days, multiple site visits within certain time frames. All of those things can impact how you score a specific action. They're also, this brand is separating them into latent behaviors and active behaviors. So your latent behaviors being things that have a lower weight, might be social actions, whereas things that are that show buying intent, like signing up for a newsletter or clicking through on a sale, like those are things that are going to be weighted a little more heavily in the score. And as you can see on the slide, they do have a scoring system. Things over 50 points are A, and on down the line. And this is just one way of doing it. And this is a pretty high level way of doing it, but this is something that you can think about and build a simpler version of this. And then this is how we worked with one of our technology partners to help them evaluate marketing influence. They were struggling to kind of see the full picture, and they ended up merging in some of our data to help tell a richer, fuller story. The reason I show this example is that it took a lot of discipline. It took them over a year to build this. And this is like a big software company with tons of resources to throw at this. I pull this up because this might be what you're aiming for, and you might think in your head, this is what I want to be able to show. It's hard to get here, and it took them a lot of discipline, a lot of time. They were very disciplined about tracking, attribution, the revenue impact within their content initiatives. All of those things impacted this structure. And sometimes it will just make sense for you to start with something that's much smaller than this. with the hope of getting to this in the long run. All right, a little more Q&A.
Actually, Kyle, we just to keep things moving along, we're going to skip Q&A here,
Sure.
dive into key takeaways, and then we'll wrap up with questions. So please keep submitting.
Cool. All right, so as we wrap up here, I wanted to kind of highlight a couple key takeaways throughout our conversation and try to wrap it all into a nice bow. So the goal is measurement, or isn't just measurement. You really want to have actionable insight. What happens too often is that people are like, well, I measure what's easy. You see this in nonprofits, but you see this really across the board. The metrics that are available and easy for me to get are the things I measure. But what you're looking for in a measurement platform is insight that you can take and make changes to your campaigns to optimize them and make them perform better, but also things that you can take back to your leadership to secure additional revenue. You need to be able to show that your measurement platform is accurately measuring what you're doing on the content and marketing side, and then providing insight not just to you, but the rest of the organization. Measurement and maturity do go hand in hand. Again, if you go back to the crawl, walk, run analogy that we used earlier, start where you are. I showed you that slide about that like very robust and complex multi-touch attribution setup. You may not be there at the beginning, but that's okay. Think about where you are and try to make sure you're getting to something that's good and useful for the organization you're in and the place you're in at the maturity level you're in. Being good doesn't have to be complex, but you can add complexity over time instead of trying to start in the most complex place. Focus on metrics that connect to your business outcomes. I could probably do a presentation on just this. I've worked in so many places where you have metrics and goals that really are totally disconnected from the business outcomes for your company. If nothing else, you need to find out which metrics are actually going to have an impact on the things that are important for your business, so that when you're taking this to people at higher levels, whether it be C-suite, your boss, whatever, you're able to draw back directly to your efforts and connect it with things that are going to impact the health of the company. Measure ROI in conjunction with your sales cycle. So we talked about this, but again, your sales cycles are wildly variable. Some are 3 months, some are 10 months, some are 26 months, some are even longer than that. Your ROI can't be measured or can't usually accurately be measured in the first month of your sales program or your content program. Think about measuring it in conjunction with your sales cycle and marrying those things together so that you can accurately reflect the return instead of giving an incomplete picture. And think about your infrastructure. I know this is a really difficult one, but the platforms you bring on to help you run your marketing campaign should connect and work well with the tools you're using to measure the success of those campaigns. And you should also think about the different places where data exists within your organization. There's a picture of revenue being spent or dollars being spent on marketing campaigns, but dollars being spent on customer service. All of these things need to go into the larger picture when you're thinking about how to build your measurement framework. And that all starts with the infrastructure that you're able to put together at the beginning of this process.
Kyle. All right, so we're going to turn over to our last Q&A section. But before we do that, I just want to take a second to give you a few reminders. So first, this class is a part of a whole curriculum that we have built out called LinkedIn Marketing Labs. So please check out the link in the agenda section, and also we'll send it in the follow-up email, but we have lots of other classes that you can access both on demand or you can view upcoming live classes. So take a look at that if you're interested in learning about different topics. And then also, we'll be pushing live our survey in just a few minutes. So again, your feedback is really important to us. This is a newer class for us, so we'd love to hear what you think about it, and so that we can tweak it and make improvements in the future. So with that being said, let's turn it over to Q&A. And so let's start with this one. So it's kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, but what forms of gated content tend to be the most effective on LinkedIn?
You guys are closer with the clients.
It's going to vary client to client, but the way I like to think about gated content is like, what is going to give that member the most value? What are they going to learn from this? How are you going to help them be better at their jobs? This is obviously an extreme case, but the way I like to think about giving up my phone number or email is being in a foreign country where I need to get onto the Wi-Fi in the airport. Like, how are you going to create that urgency? What is going to make that member give up their work email, their phone number, whatever it may be? Obviously, this is an extreme example, but you get where I'm trying to go. Like, what value are you going to provide? How are you going to help this person be more effective, learn, or be more knowledgeable?
I think it's also thinking about the larger picture of where you sit in the market too. So if it's a new developing market, nobody really knows about it, you have to create that demand for your product. And so for that, that would be more ungated, because you want to shape perception to make the audience actually want to buy you, want to talk to you. And then from a gated perspective, since I work on enterprise tech, I have one client where their product is very technical. It takes a lot of resources. So internally, if they wanted to leverage this product, they would need to get buy-in internally for like headcount, have specialists, et cetera. And so for them gated, it would need to be very technical and really help them, enable them into like actually implementing their product. And they are very high in demand as well. So that's an example of like where you'd want to go ungated versus gated.
Great, awesome. Okay, let's shift it over to cost per conversion. Jen is asking a question around that. So she's asking how to justify using LinkedIn, given that our cost per conversion tends to be a little bit higher than other platforms.
So I would say my question to you is how far down the funnel you're measuring, because typically from like an MQL or just a CPA in the platform, we will look more expensive. But what I find where my clients are really winning with leadership and driving that ROI is really at the opportunity or the revenue or return on ad spend. So I would encourage you to look a little bit deeper down the funnel if you're not. And then I would also take a look at the audience demographics. So sometimes even if we are a little bit more expensive, it's just that you get that really rich data and insight to inform some of your other marketing efforts and channels as well.
Another thing I'd say there is that you also want to look at some metrics like customer lifetime value. So thinking about, yes, you have cost per conversion, but one thing that you'll see on LinkedIn typically is that we have higher value customers, people who are able to make decisions with larger budgets. And if you're seeing a higher customer lifetime value in this platform, it helps to negate or at least push back on what might look like a higher initial cost per conversion.
Going a little bit off of both of your comments, you might be able to generate a cheaper and a higher volume of conversions on Facebook, Google, or Twitter, but how many of those conversions actually turn into an opportunity? So maybe you're seeing a $10 cost per conversion from one of those other platforms, but it's taking 10 of those conversions to yield one opportunity, where maybe on LinkedIn it's $90. So long term, it actually is more cost effective to be leveraging LinkedIn, even though upfront, again, it could be more expensive.
Awesome. Those are all great ways to think about it. Let's do one last question. So going back to what we were talking about a lot earlier, we were talking a lot about brand lift. I don't think we ever specifically answered the question, how can we track brand lift? Or are there suggestions you have on how to track that?
I mean, those are one of those things that it's going to be platform dependent. Brand lift is really hard. I mean, you could build your own survey structure and target or retarget people with a survey. The way that most brand lift studies work is that you have a target group and a control group that's shown certain pieces of content over a certain period of time, and then they're surveyed afterwards to determine whether or not they remembered seeing it. So like there's a visibility, but then did their perception shift over time based on seeing that piece of content? You could go and build your own structure, but most of the platforms have a built-in one. I know LinkedIn does as well, and so do many of the other kind of social platforms and content marketing platforms that you should be looking at. But if you want to go and build your own survey, that is the way to do it.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone. That's all the time we have today for Q&A. There are so many great questions. If we didn't get to your question, we will go through and try to answer those one-on-one in Slido. So stay tuned for that. Also, as a reminder, please take the survey. I've said that 3 times now. And also, we will be sending out a recording of this presentation along with all the resources in the platform to you in the next day or so. So thanks again for tuning in, and thank you to all 3 of you for all of your help, guidance, and recommendations. This was a great session. So have a wonderful day, everyone.